city of roses, of parks, of bridges, gateway to the Far East, and major West Coast port destination. And that's just the beginning. Where else in the continental U.S. would you find mountains and an ocean just an hour and a half drive away, and an extinct volcano right within the city limits? The city itself is diverse, but accessible, and the climate is mild. Thanks to the warm Japanese current off the Oregon coast, winter temperatures rarely dip below freezing, and in the summer, it seldom gets much above 80 degrees. As for our infamous rainfall, well, Portland actually gets less rain than New Orleans or Miami. Only about 35 inches of rain annually, just enough to keep Portland green and growing. In fact, that's what attracted the early settlers here. Unlike those who headed south, it wasn't gold they were after, but the green of the Willamette Valley. Two of those early settlers were New Englanders Asa Lovejoy and Francis Pettigrove, who bought a 640-acre claim on the banks of the Willamette. Only trouble was, both men wanted to name the new city after his own hometown. Neither of them would give in, so it finally came down to the toss of a coin at a dinner party. Pettigrove won it the best 2 out of 3. Otherwise, Portland would have been another Boston. In the early days, the city was also known as Stumptown. That's literally how Pettigrove and Lovejoy found it. Acres and acres of stumps surrounded by hills. The Indians had been using it as a campground, a stopover on their way from Vancouver to Oregon City. For years, they cut down timber for firewood, and the resulting landscape hardly fit the blueprint for an important new city. Besides, there were all those hills. And besides that, Oregon City further upstream was already well established as the capital of the new territory. Not only was it the first city to be incorporated west of the Mississippi, but it also had a working government, a newspaper, and a church. But Portland had something Oregon City didn't: access by road to the fertile farmland of the Tualatin Valley. And that would prove to be the critical difference in transporting crops by ship to California. The gold rush was on, and so was the demand for food. Portland was in the right place to take advantage. But the growing new city brought with it the predictable vices of the day. Saloons sprung up all over, and at night, drunks littered the streets. One enterprising business leader figured the real problem was thirst. And if given the choice, men after a hard day of work would prefer water to alcohol. So lumber baron Simon Benson had more than 60 water fountains installed in strategic locations downtown. While those fountains may have added to Portland's charm, they didn't solve the problem. But the city survived anyway. An even bigger threat came from a series of fires that swept through the downtown area in the winter of 1872 and again in the summer of 1873. When the Founding Fathers rebuilt, they wisely switched from wood to more durable brick and stone set off by cast iron. Today, examples of this architecture can be found in Portland's Old Town. But what is now considered one of the best showcases of cast iron facades in the country almost was left to decay and ruin. As Portland grew, the business center moved south, leaving Old Town behind. It wasn't until the 1950s that the slow restoration process began, transforming the area back to a colorful collection of restaurants and shops. Even some of the original cobblestone streets were saved. 2nd Avenue, you'll find one of the more recent restorations, the New Market Theater, a warehouse that had its beginnings as a produce market with an opera house upstairs. The theater opened in 1872 with a production of Rip Van Winkle. Next door to Old Town, with an equally colorful, if not more mysterious past, is Chinatown, with its legendary maze of tunnels. It was here the term "shanghaied" was to be taken quite literally, as many an unsuspecting young man found himself pressed into involuntary service to work the ships between the U.S. and China. In modern times, step through the intricate and impressive China Gate and into another world. Even the telephone booths have a look all their own, and the restaurants are said to have some of the best Chinese food this side of the Orient. Two questions. When is a freeway a park? And where is the smallest park in the world? Both answers can be found in Portland. Usually parks take a back seat to freeway expansion, but in Portland it's the other way around. During the early 1970s, the concrete along the west waterfront was torn up and replaced with grass to form a 23-acre greenbelt. It's now called Tom McCall Waterfront Park after Oregon's former governor, and it's easily some of the most prized real estate around. Just across the street from Tom McCall Park is a plaque boasting the smallest park in the world, Mill Ends Park, what used to be, of all things, a utility pole hole. The inspiration of a local journalist, the park measures only 2 feet in diameter. Just goes to show you what a little imagination can do. In all, Portland has 160 parks, from Council Crest, which marks the highest point in the city, to Mount Tabor, an extinct volcano where you can actually see the remains of a cinder cone. Then, too, there is Laurelhurst Park, a former swamp turned into a paradise for ducks, and the downtown park blocks, which form a tree-lined mall through the heart of downtown. But if you only have time to visit one park, make it Washington Park, the city's largest developed park and easily the most popular. Here you'll find the famous rose gardens, 10,000 rose bushes on blooming display throughout the summer. But even without the flowers, the panoramic city view is not to be missed. Just west of the rose gardens, escape to the serenity of the Japanese gardens. Actually, 5 separate gardens. They were designed by internationally known landscaping authority Professor Takuma Tono, and take you on winding paths with gracefully sculpted trees in the company of murmuring streams and waterfalls. There's even a ceremonial tea house. Not far away is the Washington Park Zoo, the elephant breeding capital of the world. It also features a children's petting zoo and an antique train that takes visitors around the park. If it's science you're interested in, next door to the zoo is the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, OMSI for short. Touch the moon in the Kendall Planetarium, or learn how electricity works. It's for children of all ages. While you're in the neighborhood, visit the World Forestry Center, which features examples of wood from all over the planet. There's even a tree here that talks.
Leaves combine water drawn up from the soil with carbon dioxide from the air.
But if it's a real forest you want to see, Portland has one of those too in Forest Park. 4,700 acres of wilderness right within the city limits, only minutes from downtown. No other U.S. city can claim anything quite like this. There are 30 miles of hiking trails, lots of wildlife to see, and if you're lucky, you may even spot a deer. Back to civilization, just on the outskirts of Forest Park, sits the elegant Pittock Mansion, built in 1914 by Henry Pittock, founder of Portland's daily newspaper. The French Renaissance-style mansion has 22 rooms and a commanding view of 2 states and 5, count them 5, mountains, including the temperamental Mount St. Helens. The mansion is now owned by the city of Portland and open to the public for tours. Who's that lady, that copper-toned lady? She's Portlandia, who kneels 45 feet above the entrance to the Portland building, her gaze fixed on the pedestrians who pass below. She's tons of hammered copper statue, in the U.S. second only in size to the Statue of Liberty. On a smaller scale, and almost as unusual, is a tribute to an elk right in the middle of Main Street. That's Portland for you. Of course, there are those who have criticized this monument as a traffic hazard, but so far, the elk hasn't budged. A little more traditional is the sculpture of Aberham Lincoln overlooking the downtown Parks blocks. If the former president looks a little grim, that's because this statue is supposed to represent Mr. Lincoln during the difficult Civil War years. It may not be art, but a lot of Portlanders are fascinated by bricks at the Pioneer Courthouse Square. At first glance, these look like ordinary bricks, but look closer and they have names engraved on them, representing the thousands of people who purchased a brick to help build the square, which before had been a parking lot. So where Portlanders once looked for their cars, they now look for their bricks. Just across the street from the square is Pioneer Courthouse, the oldest public building in the region. One of the city's favorite meeting places at the turn of the century was Skidmore Fountain. If it calls to mind the fountains of Europe, that's no coincidence. Stephen Skidmore wanted it that way. When it was unveiled in 1888, the Eastern art critics called the fountain the best example of statuary art west of Chicago. It must be mentioned that there was that offer by brewer Henry Weinhardt to run beer instead of water through the fountain. But it should also be mentioned that in the interest of art, at least we hope art was the reason anyway, the offer was politely declined. In sharp contrast to Skidmore Fountain, there is the modernistic Ira Keller Fountain, also known as Forecourt Fountain, also known as the People's Fountain, just across from the Civic Auditorium. Whatever you call it, it's a favorite gathering place for brown beggars in the summer. Concrete slabs become terraced waterfalls, and children of all ages love to go wading in the pools below. If your preference for art runs to the kind found indoors in frames, there's the Portland Art Museum, recognized as one of the best small art museums in the country. Not only does it have a fine collection of Northwest Indian art, but also an internationally recognized collection of Asian art. If it's history you're after, Oregon history that is, Pay a visit to the Oregon Historical Society and take a step back in time. Retrace the Oregon Trail. At night, culture comes out, and Portland has it all. From opera to ballet to a symphony orchestra, considered to be one of the best in the country. And the city has gone all out to showcase its local talents with a brand new performing arts center. On weekends, the place to be is the Saturday Market, open Sundays too. Under the Burnside Bridge, a carnival comes to life every weekend from April through Christmas, featuring everything from musicians to local crafts. While you're browsing through the booths, sample some of the ethnic foods and a cinnamon sugar confection known as elephant ears. If it's action you want, Portland is one sporting kind of town. From center court with the former world champion Trailblazers to cutting up the ice with the Portland Winterhawks. And there's Beaver baseball, too. And Portlanders aren't just content with sitting back and watching sports. They want to be caught up in the action, too, literally. Every year, thousands take to the street for the Cascade Runoff.
7,500 runners. Reminder, drink lots of water. It's going to warm up out there. Okay, you're 20 seconds, 20 seconds. Those of you crossing the line now, 25 seconds.
And there are races of the four-legged variety, too. What could be faster than a speeding greyhound? The Multnomah Kennel Club provides the answer every summer. And when the dogs aren't running, you can bet the horses are at Portland Meadows. The season runs from late October through April. And the question they ask around here is, can horses really fly?
Up in the middle of the track, that is Spooky Native. It is Senorita's Boy, winner of the Oregon Derby.
This is the Hot Air Balloon Classic, what has become a tradition at Rose Festival time. It all happens in early June. The balloons go up, the fleet comes in, and the parades march on. It all happens in early June. The very first Rose Festival was held way back in 1907 to honor what else but Portland's award-winning roses. It's no surprise then that Portland is known as the Rose City. The annual festival includes the Grand Floral Parade, a torchlight parade, and the largest children's parade in the country, plus enough events to pack into a 17-day-long party. One look at the river and you'll know it's Rose Festival time. Every inch of the seawall is taken up with ships, and it only happens once a year. The rest of the summer, the Willamette is filled up with speedboats and sailboats and anything else that floats. Fishing is a favorite pastime, too. Steelhead run in late winter to early spring. Chinook salmon follow soon after, and the sturgeon are permanent residents. If you haven't figured it out, Portlanders like to spend a lot of time outdoors. And with the mild climate, they can enjoy the water almost year-round. The same goes for golfing. Portland has quite a number of public as well as private courses to test your skills. Even skiing is a year-round sport, and only an hour and a half away at Mount Hood. The Palmer Chairlift runs all summer long, but you don't have to ski to enjoy the mountain. There is the historic Timberline Lodge, built a half-century ago as a Conservation Corps project. President Franklin Roosevelt himself did the dedication, and thousands have come to visit every year since. Not only is the size of the massive building impressive, but every square inch was meticulously handcrafted, from the giant exposed beams to each and every lampshade. The lodge also features a cozy bar and dining room, and for those who wish to enjoy the surroundings a little longer, there are overnight accommodations. Just about the same time Timberline Lodge was being built, the Columbia River got its first of many hydroelectric dams, Bonneville, named for an early explorer in these parts. 50 years later, the Bonneville Dam is still producing electricity for the region. Visitors can see how the giant turbines work and also get a peek through underwater windows at the fish migrating upstream. The Columbia Gorge has more than its share of natural wonders, too. No less than 7 waterfalls can be seen without ever leaving the highway. Of those, Multnomah Falls is the biggest and best known, perhaps because it is the most photographed. It's easy to see why. The falls is actually 2 waterfalls in one, separated by a footbridge. It's only a short hike to the bridge for a closer view of the upper falls. But what has to be the best view of all, though, is the vista from Crown Point. You can see for miles and miles the beauty that is the Columbia River Gorge. Or see it from the river aboard an old-fashioned sternwheeler. This is how they navigated the gorge in the old days. Nowadays, it's more likely to be on a sailboard. The fast-moving Columbia and the strong gorge winds have combined to make this the windsurfing capital of the world. Wine country is our next stop. Just to the west of Portland, more than 35 wineries have sprung up in recent years, and with good reason. The soil is fertile and the growing conditions much like those of Northern Europe. In fact, Oregon has won international acclaim for its Pinot Noirs, and other varieties are making a strong showing too. Taste for yourself. Tours are available year-round. And what trip to Oregon would be complete without a visit to the coast? Miles and miles of beaches to enjoy. On a hot summer day, it's the perfect escape from the city, although there are those who would argue that the best time to experience it is at the height of a winter storm. Either way, the Oregon coast is not to be missed. You can't beat the seafood here either. And you haven't seen a sunset until you've seen one here. Best of all, it's only an hour and a half away from Portland. That's the big drawing card. Nothing is very far away. Whether it's the ocean or the mountains, you can be there and back the same day. The city sides of Portland are just minutes away. And downtown, everything is within walking distance. Or hop aboard a bus. It's free within a 340-block area known as the Fairless Square. Or for a real adventure, take Max, Portland's light rail. It runs from downtown to Old Town, then across the river to Portland's first shopping mall, Lloyd Center, then on to Gresham and back. Great fun just for the ride. Fact is, you just can't miss in Portland. It's a destination you'll want to come back to again and again. Guaranteed.